Welcome everyone to the first ever CamAPS FX webinar. This is the first in the series of 5 we've planned between now and the end of the year, and we will have more coming in the future. This is the team who are involved in delivering the CamAPS system. Charlotte and Sarah will be presenting tonight. Roman is the brains behind the system, and I'm here to moderate. Please make sure that you are on mute and your camera is not off, just to help with the running of the system. We have a number of webinars coming up, so don't forget to book your place. There's lots of different discussions and different opportunities that we will be providing you with real life data just to show you the difference that this system makes. I'm going to hand over to Sarah to start the session. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. So to start off with, we wanted to introduce the CamAPS FX system to you and explain some of the features. And as Candice said, then we'll go through in future sessions looking at other aspects of setting the system up, optimizing settings with some useful, hopefully, case studies around that, and go from there. So hopefully you'll find that useful. So to outline what we wanted to go through this evening, we'll go through the components of the CamAPS FX and talk about how the system works, understand what inputs you need to get it going, and the settings that you need that will have an effect on the system. We'll talk a little bit about the evidence and the indications for use, and also go through some of the features of it with you. So to start off with, by just running through what the components of a closed loop system are. So any closed loop system needs an insulin pump of some description, a continuous glucose sensor to provide continuous glucose data, and then some kind of control algorithm, which in some systems is embedded in the insulin pump itself, or as with our system, it's housed on a smartphone app. The other important factor is having a platform for viewing the data. So in terms of the CamAPS FX system, the algorithm itself, as I said, is housed on an app, and the app runs currently only on an Android smartphone. And so one of the important things with this system is double checking that that Android smartphone is compatible with any that are on the Dexcom G6 compatibility list, and you can just find that by Googling Dexcom G6 Android phone compatibility. It comes up with a list that you can check against there. Our system currently links with only one brand of insulin pump, which is a Dana insulin pump. You can see in the picture here, it's a Dana RS insulin pump, and you can use it with any type of fast-acting or ultra-fast acting insulin. It will also be compatible with the new Dana I insulin pump that will be released at the end of this month. From a CGM point of view, it links with Dexcom G6. And in terms of data, data is sent in automatically. It's automatically uploaded whenever you're attached to Wi-Fi, or if you've got a SIM card in the phone, to the DISM platform to be viewed there. And all the communication between the parts is by Bluetooth. There's also the option for real-time text alerts, which is particularly useful for parents of young children who might be on the system.
And so, Sarah, can I just check, because I think that's really important there's lots of issues sometimes with downloading pump data and things, so there's no need for any sort of connection to a cable or a box or anything. It will just do it all automatically.
Yep. If the phone has a SIM card in, it will automatically send data constantly to DISM. Otherwise, it would be when it's attached to Wi-Fi. Yep.
So I was going to talk a little bit about how the CamAPS FX system works. There's obviously a couple of closed loop systems now which are available to use, and each of them is slightly different. I think it's really important that people understand how the system that they're using works, and also for healthcare professionals to understand the differences. So the way that this system works, so the algorithm, which is on the smartphone app, it directs the insulin pump about insulin delivery, and it does this by giving extended boluses on the pump every 10 to 12 minutes. and it calculates the right insulin infusion using the real-time sensor glucose levels provided by the Dexcom CGM. And it's adjusting this every 10 to 12 minutes automatically behind the scenes. So what you can see on the graph on the slide is at the bottom panel here, that thin blue line, that's every 10 to 12 minutes, a different insulin infusion rate, which is calculated by the algorithm in response to the glucose levels being delivered. And that happens throughout the day and the night without any sort of intervention. Because this is a hybrid closed loop system, people still need to bolus for meals or carbohydrate containing snacks. And as usual, we'd suggest that people bolus before they eat. And that's just because insulin takes a little bit of time for it to be absorbed and working. So what you can see on the graph is where there's those big blue lines on the bottom, they're the boluses that have been given by the user. And that correlates with the green triangle for the carbohydrate meal. For those of you wondering about the yellow and red boxes, there's something called ease off and boost, which we'll cover later on when we talk about the features of the system. So that's really, in essence, how the closed loop system works in this case. So again, different closed loop systems have different settings which affect how the closed loop system operates. With the CamAPS FX system, the adjustable settings that can help to optimize outcomes are the insulin to carbohydrate ratio, which does change over time and often varies throughout the day, and also the glucose target. So the default for this closed loop system is 5.8, and we'll go into how that can be adjusted and personalized a little bit later on. Settings which don't affect closed loop operation with this system are the active insulin time, the insulin sensitivity, and the pre-programmed basal rates. And that's because this is all done by the algorithm itself behind the scenes. So these settings are important if auto mode isn't able to run for whatever reason. So it's important that these settings are accurate and correct, but actually when closed loop is running or auto mode is in operation, then adjusting those settings isn't going to affect how the closed loop system works. And that's quite important because that does differ from other closed loop systems. So in terms of getting started, and we do have a separate webinar on this later on in this series, but it really is very, very straightforward. So the only two things that the system needs to get started is information about the body weight and the total daily dose of insulin. And we tend to base that not just on yesterday's dose, which may have been affected by a big meal or something unusual. We tend to do an average of the past week is usually what we would do. And then what happens from these two bits of information, the algorithm then starts to calculate the insulin sensitivity and active insulin time. And this happens behind the scenes, and it's constantly adjusting and adapting to the individual. So it really is highly adaptable. In terms of keeping auto mode running, it obviously needs information about the glucose in real time, and that's from the Dexcom sensor, so that it can understand the effect of the insulin and adjust that. And it also, because it's a hybrid closed loop system, it requires information about carbohydrate and the pre-carbohydrate insulin bolus. So this, the algorithm that's used in this system has been really extensively investigated in randomized clinical trials over the past 10, 20 years, which have become sort of increasingly longer, larger number of people involved in the studies, and across a really wide population. And that's allowed for the license to be quite broad, and so anyone with type 1 diabetes aged 1 year and over can use the system, and that includes women during pregnancy, and that's because the glucose target, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, can be adjusted. So it's really sort of widely accessible to almost anyone with type 1 diabetes, and that comes from this really strong evidence base which has shown its safety and efficacy in really high quality trials. And you can see here that the weight range and the total daily insulin dose, which again are very wide, so it's got a really broad indication for use and really accessible.
And I think you can see that by some of the people that we've got using the system currently. We've recently started a newly diagnosed little boy who's not even 2 yet on the system, and equally in some of the research studies we've got some people who are in an over 60 study, who I think our eldest is 80 years old, who's successfully using the system. Just taking us through to some of the features next. This is a snapshot of the home screen of the app itself, and so there's a couple of things that we'll go through with you, but just to point out initially. So the home screen itself, and you can see we're on the home screen because there's a little house icon that we're underneath here on this picture, but there's also the Bolus menu icon is here that we'll go through in a little bit more detail shortly. Because essentially the Dexcom glucose or the G6 app is embedded within the CamAPS FX app, you've got the things that you'll be used to seeing if you use Dexcom in terms of the display of the glucose level, but also the fact that you can calibrate the system. You don't usually need to, but it has got that ability if needs be, with that little blood drop icon at the top there. Then you can see, as well as your glucose reading, you can see your glucose data trace and the target range indicator here. You can customize the axis by squeezing it up and down to make it the sort of level that you might want to see it, and you can also scroll back and look at it going back through the day. There's also a landscape view by rotating the phone that we'll go through in a bit more detail in a minute, that gives you much more information about what the system's doing at that time, and you can scroll back through that as well. We'll go through some of the other features in terms of boost and ease off, which are essentially kind of clever increased and decreased temporary basal rates. You can see at the bottom right there, that's how you turn auto mode on and off. And we'll go through a bit more about how you're able to personalize the glucose target. You can see on this snapshot, there's a little target sign showing that there's a personalized glucose target running here. So moving on to the Bolus menu, if you touch that knife and fork icon, it brings up the Bolus calculator, and all bolusing with the system is done via the phone. There's no need to do anything via the pump. So really, the only thing you need to do with the pump is use it for a set change every 3 days. Otherwise, it's tucked away and you're purely using the phone. There's a number of ways you can enter your carb intake. The glucose from the sensor glucose will show there, but when auto mode's running, the algorithm has constantly been adjusting for any high or out of target or glucose levels. So the bolus calculator is purely to deliver a bolus for the carb. So you can either choose a meal size, you can move a toggle along the top to give you an amount of carbs, or what most people would do is just tap the carb gap there and enter, as you can see in the middle screen, the actual amount of carbohydrate, and then it would bring up your total units for your bolus, which is based on the settings in the bolus calculator on the pump. You would press next and deliver the bolus.
So you can customize the meal sizes, can you, or are they fixed?
No, you can customize them. So in the settings menu, you can choose the amount of carbs that would be on each of those icons by touching them, which can be useful for things. You want to be as accurate as you can with your carb counting. So it's sometimes better just to type it in. If there's always a particular snack or a meal, I don't know if you always have a coffee in the morning that's is a certain amount of carbs from the milk, then you might customize and preset one of those meal sizes that can be useful and quick just to deliver that. In terms of other really important features that I think make this system stand out from other closed loop systems available is you have the ability to use these boost and ease off features. So if we look at boost first, and you can see it's on the bottom of the home screen, you can see the boost and ease off buttons. Boost makes the algorithm more aggressive, roughly by about 35%. So it will increase the insulin delivery from the automated insulin delivery that the system's giving. What's really clever about Boost, though, is once glucose reaches target, Boost won't push any extra insulin. So it really reduces the risk of going low at that point. If then the glucose then rises again within the time that Boost set for, it will again deliver extra insulin. So it's a safe way of leaving, but you can leave Boost on safely for a number of hours without worrying that it will overshoot and make you go low in the same way as setting a increased temporary basal on a pump usually could. The other great thing about boost and ease off with this system is that you can preset them. So you would literally touch the icon, it would ask you how long you want to boost for, and then you can say whether you want to start it now or whether you want to preset it for a later date. And when boost is running, you can it shows in a blue bar along the bottom of the home screen, there's a little icon with a cross, and if you wanted, there was a reason to stop it sooner than you'd planned, you would literally press the cross and turn it off. The main uses for boost are can be useful premenstrually. It can be really useful in adolescents who are experiencing those kind of growth hormone pulses. Some people will find it helpful for postprandial hyperglycemia. Say you've miscalculated your carbohydrate of a meal and your blood sugars have gone a little bit higher than you were hoping. Putting boost on then can just help the algorithm bring the glucose back down to target range a bit faster. And it can be useful for stress or low grade illness that is the type that isn't ketone producing. You're not requiring kind of pump sick day rules. You could just put boost on and just help the algorithm deal with those slightly above target levels quicker.
And what about those pizzas and high fat meals?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. For people who would have historically on a pump maybe used an extended bolus or a dual wave, what you can do is give an upfront bolus. Say if you would historically have done maybe 70% upfront and the other 30% over a wave, what you might do is give the 70% upfront, but then put boost on at the same time and let the system deal with the remaining carbs that will be absorbed more slowly with those kind of higher fat, higher carb meals. That can be a really useful function of it as well. In terms of the ease off, it essentially it does the opposite. So it makes the algorithm less aggressive, and it will reduce that automated insulin delivery by temporarily raising the glucose target at that time, and also stopping delivering any insulin if the glucose drops below 7. So that's particularly useful around activity and exercise. So before, during and after, and the usual rules would apply as you would with normal pump therapy, and that ideally you would want to set it running kind of 60 to 90 minutes before you were active, and then for the duration and usually sometime after the activity as well. It's also useful with things if you've had a run of if you've had a hypo or a run of a couple of dips that day, which can happen in hot weather and things. Running ease off for a chunk of time can just help kind of just bring the glucose back up and stabilize things out a little bit. Do you want to go through the personal glucose target, Charlotte?
Yeah, so I mentioned previously the algorithm is set up to aim for a glucose of around 5.8. But this is actually adjustable, and it's adjustable at different times of day and night, because actually not everybody, one target doesn't really suit everybody. So this is really another feature that can be used to help personalize the algorithm and customize it to an individual's needs. So you can choose a target anything from 4.4 up to 11, and you can set it almost like basal rates are set. So you can see on the slide there, you can sort of pick hours of the day and adjust the target. Now, for the majority of people, actually 5.8 is perfectly reasonable target to start with, but in certain situations you might think about adjusting the target. So if people have very low glucose variability, so they don't have really big swings, then that might make somebody think, okay, they could go for a slightly lower target, so the risk of hypos is low. And particularly during pregnancy, where we're really aiming for very tight glucose control, then reducing that target is really important. Times to increase the target where people are having frequent episodes of hypoglycemia, or in people who are particularly at risk of hypoglycemia or may take a longer time to respond to hypoglycemia, then actually increasing the target can be helpful as well. And particularly increasing the target at night or in the daytime and keeping it at 5.8 in the other one. These are all options that are there to sort of, as I say, help customize it to suit the needs of the individual user. And I think Sarah mentioned earlier, when on the home screen, if you then turn the app horizontally, you get this much more detailed graph, which really has everything on it that Diasend shows. So you can see here, the sensor glucose sort of overlies the closed loop insulin delivery. And you can also see the boluses that have been given and the ease off and boost. And where this is really useful is some of the decision making that differs slightly with closed loop from standard sort of pump therapy. And really we'll go into this in a separate webinar about optimization and the key differences and getting the most out of closed loop. But it's really helpful if you notice that your glucose is high, to be able to see, well, actually, if closed loop has started to give quite a lot of insulin to combat that. So you can see on this screen at about sort of 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, the glucose has gone slightly high, but actually, look, closed loop behind the scenes has already ramped up and given quite a lot of insulin. So really the option there is not to sort of give a manual correction or anything. So it can be really helpful in those sort of decision making. You can kind of pinch both the axes and you can scroll back and it'll have about 3 weeks of data there. So you can sort of review patterns and trends. And as I say, it just really gives the information and an understanding of what the algorithm is doing behind the scenes and how closed loop is really working. So hopefully we've sort of covered what the key for use are and some of the key features. So I think Sarah was going to talk a little bit about support.
Yeah, so in terms of the app, there's all the support you would expect from a commercially available closed loop system. So there is a really good website that's got loads of additional information just about the system itself, frequently asked questions, some troubleshooting guides in there, links to the support website and a telephone contact number for the support team. There's also, you know, Charlotte earlier showed you information about some of the evidence and the research. There's links to the various research studies and the evidence for the system. And there's also a link to the online training platform, which Candice can talk to you a little bit more about.
Yes, CDEP has developed the online training for the system, which takes you through the preparation to use the system, as well as optimization tips and skills, also refreshing carbohydrate counting skills, and also getting familiar with the Dana pump if you are somebody who hasn't used it before or has had training on it a while ago and just wants to refresh their skills. The training is done online via your computer, smartphone, or tablet, so you can do it any time of the day or night, whenever it's convenient, and it's completely free. So do please have a look at it and see what you find interesting. It's for people with diabetes, their family and friends, as well as diabetes healthcare professionals and teachers and support staff who may be coming across and supporting children in their school. The next lot of webinars are coming up, so please do have a look at booking into them. They will be, again, the half-an-hour format with questions at the end, so please do feel free to book into the webinars. We'll take some questions now. As we've been going along, and we've got a couple of really good questions. If anybody else does want to add any questions, please just type them into the chat and we will answer them as we go along. The first question, and I think we missed it at the beginning because of the sound, apologies for that, is we are recording the session. It will be uploaded on the training portal so it can be watched later. So just, yes, we are recording it. There was another question about whether the CamAPS system will link with other glucose sensors as well as other pumps. Sarah, do you want to just clarify and talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, so I think the vision for the app is that it's compatible. It is hopefully at some point in time kind of a pick and mix where you can have the app and you can link with this and this pump or this and this sensor. At the moment, it's obviously been launched with the Dana and with Dexcom G6. But as any new products are coming to market that we think might be good to link with, then we're always looking for opportunities to do that. So I think someone asked specifically about Libra 3 and Glucomen Day, and I know Roman is always looking with any potential new partners to see what's possible.
No, absolutely. And then there was another question about, in terms of settings, is it possible to note that you can sort of look at what the algorithm is giving to be able to update your sort of pump settings to, if you're not in using the auto mode, to make the pump settings more accurate?
Currently, no, actually. I think one of the reasons is because it can be so variable. And I know sort of way back when we started doing the first studies and we didn't have this really neat little app on a smartphone, people were having to carry around clunky computers and kit and things with them. One of the reasons people kind of signed up to the studies was they hoped at the end of it they'd be able to kind of get out some kind of you know, magical formula that they'd be able to then set their pump up with to kind of make everything a little bit better. But actually what we found and what they realized as well was because pretty much no 2 days and nights are the same, it's actually quite difficult to do that. The system is also, because it adjusts, it calculates its own sensitivity and active insulin times, which will be different at different times of the day. It's all quite complex. So the answer to that at the moment is no, there isn't a way to kind of work out from the system what you could perhaps, how you could perhaps set your pump up differently to kind of to optimize the pump settings outside auto mode.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, we've got quite a global sort of audience today, and they were asking whether it was going to be available worldwide.
So obviously it was just been launched in the UK at the moment, and via the website, when you're signing up for it, there's a box to tick to say that you are based in the UK. So currently it's for only for people who claim to be based in the UK for licensing reasons. But we've already kind of been doing some of the pre-work to launch in Germany. The website is sooner, if not already, available in German, and we'll be looking to do the same in France and elsewhere in the future. So they're the next steps.
Right, there was a question about completing the training modules and starting the download of the app. Now we'll go through that in 2 weeks' time in much more detail and how that will all work. But yes, completing the training modules, both for healthcare professionals who want to train people to use the product, but also for people who are going to start using the product for themselves, need to both go through the training modules and get the certificates to unlock the app for download.
So you can actually download it. Anyone can download the app. So the app is available on the Amazon App Store. So and on the website, when you do the training, it takes you through kind of how you would go about downloading the Amazon App Store and then downloading the app from the Amazon App Store. So anyone can download the app. What you can't do until you have till your pump is live on the system, which happens when you register on the system. One of the things it asks for is your pump serial number, which makes the pump live so that the pump can be accessed. And also you have your training certificate number to be able to link the pump to the app. So although you can download it, you wouldn't be able to link the pump to the app without A, having the pump available on the system, and B, having a trainer's certificate number. So that might be for people who are being supported by a member of their clinic team. Their clinic team might have give them their certificate number, or like Candace said, you can self-train and have your own certificate number to enter. So yeah, we'll go through in the next webinar. The idea was to literally go through in detail everything that you would need to do to kind of set up and link to make it as clear as possible. But actually it's pretty intuitive. It kind of almost talks you through it as you go along, so it's easy.
Absolutely. And then there was a question about cost of the app. You know, how does payment and work?
And yeah, and do we offer a free trial? Yeah, so currently the app costs between £70 and £80 a month, depending on what length of subscription you sign up to. So a month at a time subscription is £80 a month, 6 months 75, a year 70. What happens is when if you wanted to self-fund, you would go onto the website, you would go to orders, and you would go through choose your payment package, and you would be invoiced for it. There is the opportunity to have a free trial. So if you, on the payment page, there's a promo code, and if you enter COVID-19 in the promo box, then you can access a month free. Obviously, one of the reasons that we continue to work so hard, we've got kind of, I think, 6 or 7 research projects still kind of ongoing that will hopefully be published. A lot of them will finish at the end of this year and be published next, hopefully. Is that what we're trying to do is prove continue to provide evidence in terms of safety and efficacy for, well, the safety and efficacy is already proven, but in various different groups of patients, so that we can hopefully provide evidence for reimbursement, because that is what we are aiming for, whether it's our system, other closed loop systems. We want reimbursement on the NHS. So, it's great if people are willing to self-fund and can afford to do that. But the aim of carrying on and doing as much research as possible is to provide evidence for reimbursement.
Great. Another question about Apple devices, just on Android at the moment?
Yeah, just on Android at the moment. I think it's something in the longer term plan. I mean, it makes complete sense to have it available on Apple, but I think from a commercial point of view, the costs associated with having it on iOS systems initially when you're launching is quite different and significant. And I think we've had to go down this road of Android only to start with, and then that will be the aim to have it available on both platforms. But there's no firm date for that at the moment.
Okay, great. A nice practical question now about taking off the pump for longer periods of time for swimming or having a bath, and how does sort of the system cope with that?
Yeah, so although technically everything's waterproof, most people would probably take their pump off for a swim or a bath generally. So with any closed loop system, you'd suggest anyone that took it off for more than 15 minutes that you should suspend the pump, which is, would be unusual just with normal pump therapy. The reason being, for closed loop, the system is expecting that all the insulin that it thinks it's delivered has gone into the person, and its calculations are based on that. So yeah, if the pump is unattached for more than 15 minutes, then we'd encourage people to suspend it, so the system knows that there's no insulin being delivered. One of the good things about ease off is, I mean, it's obviously not so relevant for having a bath or but for swimming, you can set ease off for a period of time before you swim. You're off the pump during swimming, obviously, and then you can have ease off running if you need to for a period of time after the swim. And we've got a couple of swimmers that use the system, and because they get up so early to swim, they're like in the pool by 6. What's great is they can preset that ease off to come on at kind of 4:30 in the morning while they're still asleep. So by the time they get in the pool, they've already had that period of time where there's less insulin in their system, and so they're in a good place to start their swim session. So yeah, that's how we would deal with that.
Great. Next question is about glucose data getting onto Clarity.
Yeah, so not currently. So currently at the moment, all the glucose data is sent to the DiaSend platform, and you can view the data. So you can view the data, as you saw with when the phone is turned landscape, you can see the data and you can scroll back through and kind of go back quite a long way, months actually. But it's usually more helpful to log onto your actual DiaSend account and have a look at the data displayed in that format. People who are potentially want to follow or keep an eye on maybe younger children, they can download the DiaSend app to their phones and link it to their same DiaSend account. And it's not real time, but it's kind of 1 or 2 minutes behind usually, as long as the person who has the phone has Wi-Fi or a SIM card in there. In terms of Clarity, what we're looking is to have Dexcom Follow available. We were hoping before Christmas, but realistically everything's kind of got put back a bit from Dexcom's point of view, and from our point of view with work streams and things from so yeah, whereas we'd hoped it would be kind of before Christmas, we're probably realistically looking at the first quarter of next year, so probably like spring next year, you'll be able to use Dexcom Follow. And then because Dexcom Follow is available, then that will mean that you'll also be able to view data on a smartwatch as well. So any type of smartwatch, because that will be linking to Clarity, so or to Dexcom Follow. So that could be an Apple smartwatch or an Android smartwatch when we get to that point. But like I say, disappointing. We were hoping by Christmas, but it's been pushed back a little bit. So, but that's currently the priority. That's one of the main things we're working on to get that as soon as possible.
Thanks. So the next question is about the closed loop system being a hybrid, and if somebody eats sort of 3 times a day or 5 times a day or snacks more or less, you know, is it able to cope with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we would encourage is any carbohydrate containing meals or snacks are bolused for via the phone. And you know, the system, the reason that all closed loop systems that are currently commercially available for type 1 are hybrid is because insulin is just not quick enough, even though we can use Fiasp and the new Lilly insulin in our system. It's still not fast enough to do the same thing as you know, if you're producing your own insulin, it's kind of being delivered straight into your portal vein and spreading really quickly. So there's still absorption issues. So, you know, we'd encourage to bolus as accurately as you can for all meals and snacks. For children that potentially are kind of grazers, and it does tend to be in the younger children that happens, there is the ability, instead of kind of constantly bolusing and risking kind of a stacking effect, which you can still get with even with a closed loop system, there's the ability to as an add meal function that can just provide additional insulin for those snacks, but not in such an aggressive way as if you constantly bolus and ended up with that stacking effect. And you know, there'll be certain things people experiment, and there'll be certain snacks and meals that you kind of might not bolus for and kind of see what happens. The system will deal with it, but you'll just have a bigger peak and trough than you would if you bolus for it up front.
Thank you. So this is a question in regards to ease off, and thinking probably in terms of a temporary basal rate on a pump. Are there different levels of ease off for lighter exercise versus sort of heavier exercise?
No, there isn't. There's just one ease off function. And so what we normally suggest, because exercise is so individual, as anyone would understand that sort of has anything to do with type 1 diabetes, what we'd normally suggest is whatever the way you manage a particular type of exercise on normal pump therapy, is that you use that as a starting point for what you do with closed loop. There's some significant differences, and we will do a whole session on exercise. But for some people, ease off for some exercise alone will be fine, and they'll set it before and it'll run during, and perhaps run for an hour or 2 hours afterwards. If exercise is kind of more strenuous, more intense for a longer duration, ease off alone might not be enough, and it might be that you need to do a mixture of ease off and drizzling in some carbs as you go along. What's definitely very different from normal pump therapy is you don't want to have a situation where you're preloading carbs before exercise, because all that will happen with a closed loop system is the glucose will start to rise, and therefore extra insulin will be delivered to deal with that rise. And then at the point you start to exercise, you've got a situation where you have got a lot of extra insulin slopping around at the point where you're just about to be much more active and more sensitive to that insulin, and then that potentially can cause a problem. So we definitely would recommend drizzling in carbs rather than front loading pre-exercise. And there will be some forms of exercise where actually turning auto mode off and doing putting the pump in a really low reduced temporary basal, I don't know, because you're going to run a marathon or something, and is what you need to do. But I think the main thing is looking as a starting point based on probably what you were doing before for that particular type of exercise, and using that and then strategically adjusting depending on kind of what happens. But yeah, it should be easier, and certainly after exercise with the use of ease off should be significantly easier to manage.
Okay. And then there's a question about gastroparesis and variable insulin absorption. Have you done any research studies around these two sort of areas?
We haven't done any actual research studies because obviously it's you know, thankfully it's not that common an occurrence. But in Cambridge, we have had a fair bit of experience with using closed loop for gastroparesis. We've got a couple of patients, well, we've got kind of probably 8 or 10 people with gastroparesis on Medtronic system, and we've got people that we've just started since this has been available on this system, and it makes sense. And I think the real bonus of this system compared to other commercially available systems is the fact that you can really you can customize those personal glucose targets quite widely, because certainly a couple of people that we've got who have quite significant problems with gastroparesis, they'd historically run fairly high just to avoid the kind of severe hypos that they had encountered along the way. And so it wouldn't have been appropriate to just put them on the system with a target of 5.8. They kind of had fairly high A1Cs. And so what's been really great is we've gradually nudged down targets and got massive improvement in control. It's been phenomenal, because it makes sense, you know, if you've got a system that is reacting to the glucose that's actually being absorbed, rather than you're giving bolus for the, you know, bolusing loads of insulin and basal insulin for what you hope will kind of be the situation that then tends to not work out, is going to be better. We're still kind of cautious initially with how much you'd bolus up front, especially if people kind of are prone to sort of vomiting and they're not quite sure what will happen. But what then tends to happen is, as you get that better control, if vomiting is the thing that was a problem, it's tending to settle a bit in any case. And yeah, it's early days, because obviously this has only been available since, you know, earlier on in the spring. But certainly for people that are using it, it's been life-changing.
Great. Gosh, there are lots of questions, which is excellent.
Okay, I should be quicker in my answers.
So the next two questions are fairly similar about, you know, what happens when it loses connectivity, or the Dexcom may be faulty or have a false reading.
Okay, so kind of two different things. If it loses connectivity, what happens is, and actually you will get kind of transient dropouts on and off, or you might have gone into the garden to hang the washing out and left the phone on the side or whatever, and it'll lose for a minute and it will connect back up when you come in the house, that sort of thing. In those situations, closed loop will continue to deliver its plan. It will have made a plan for the next sort of half hour, 40 minutes, maybe even slightly longer. You know, if it happened to happen during the night when actually glucose has been really stable, you might even find it carries on delivering insulin in closed loop for over, you know, kind of an hour's time. But at the point when it gets to the system thinks, okay, now I'm not sure what, there's no glucose reading, I'm not sure what to do next. What happens is, from a safety default, it just drops back into the current the pump, normal pump basal, so that you're not without insulin. And sometimes it might do that overnight, for example, without you even knowing, and then it will flick back when the glucose levels are available, the glucose reading, sorry, is available again. In terms of if the sensor is misreading, obviously if it's overreading, that's more of a problem than if it's underreading. Generally, you know, one of the reasons for initially starting this off with Dexcom G6 is because of the accuracy. Still, you'll get the odd time where people, often people wouldn't know if it was underreading or overreading unless there was a particular issue. I don't know, say it was reading 15 and the person was like, I really don't feel like I'm 15, and it triggered them to do a finger stick. The normal calibration rules apply as with any system. You would want to calibrate, and you would probably want to take it out of auto mode until you were happy that the sensor was reading accurately again, and then you would calibrate the sensor if it was indicated. So if it's been stable for a period of an hour or so, and you do a finger stick to compare, and it's more than 3 millimoles different either way, then we would encourage you to calibrate, but not if you were hypo and not if you were high. You would want to wait till it was stable, so you'd turn auto mode off until that was something that you could check.
Excellent, thank you. I've just been scrolling through to check that we've got everyone, but there's, I think, one more question about, are some trusts funding it? So are some CCGs actually providing funding, or are all people on the system having to self-fund?
Yeah, no, we have had some people who are getting funding via individual funding requests, which for those people kind of listening who are the people that end up having to write the funding requests, we kind of, you know, that's not something we want to kind of keep doing, because it's a lot of work. That's why we're trying to look for other ways of reimbursement. In pediatrics particularly, there are a number of CCGs that are funding it, a number of centres, so Liverpool, Southampton, Nottingham, We're in the process of kind of getting there with other places as well. So it's kind of rolling in terms of NHS funding, particularly for paediatrics. And then we're in kind of talks with all the relevant people. So the Diabetes Technology Network, JDRF, who supported a lot of the funding for the research over the years, NHS Diabetes, talking to all the right people in terms of looking for reimbursement. So it's something that, as I said, it's the reason for doing so much research ongoing, is reimbursement's the key. That's what we want, access to closed loop for as many people as possible. So yeah.
Thanks. There was a question or a request to share business cases, and what we are busy in the process of doing is collating some business cases and evidence and patient sort of feedback or verbatim vignettes about the difference it's made to help motivate cases, and this will be housed on the CamDiab website. But if you give us an email, we can also share it with you directly before it's hosted. But we will keep in touch with you via the webinars and via our emails to just keep up to date and share with you any resources we develop to help you.
Yeah, because we've got some cost analyses and things that are really positive. So anything like that, we're very, very happy to share. Just anytime, email via the support line, and we'll get back to you with whatever we can help with.
No, absolutely. Are there any more questions, or is there any question I might have missed scrolling up and down? I think that's a no. Well, thank you very much. We have designed this as being very sort of short and sweet. We know it's late in the day. People have had busy days. Just a bit of informative information, keeping it nice and hopefully informal. And then we will see you maybe in 2 weeks' time when we go through the starting of the process and showing you little tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. So thank you. Have a good rest of your night. And yeah, keep safe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.